What's up, everyone? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we are back with a retro review. And we decided to go over one of my favorite one-off albums, just because it was one of the most furious albums released in 1989, even though it was recorded in 1986, and we are talking about Repulsion's Horrified. Now, that isn't the actual name of the album when it originally came out, but that's the name they kind of had to stick with when it was released, and we're going to get into this whole story because this band may have been one of the earliest incarnations of grindcore.
I would state probably one of the first, if not the first. I'd have to really get into it to look.
Highly influential to extreme metal across the board. I believe bands like Entombed has cited them as a big influence, Morbid Angel. These guys pretty much just went as hard and as fast as humanly possible and absolutely just destroyed the senses, giving no fucks along the way.
Right? Slow? No. Fuck off.
It's boring. Slow is boring. At least according to Repulsion. Now, this band technically formed in 1985 or 86, at least in terms of Repulsion. To get back to the original formation of this, when this all started, you have to go back to 1984, when Scott Carlson, Matt Olivo, Matt Diffin, and James Autumn all formed a band called Tempter. Now, this band was a thrash band. They pretty much did a lot of Bay Area covers, so plenty of Metallica, plenty of Exodus, probably some Slayer in there too because they're nice and heavy. This pretty much kind of started their whole little thing into more extreme metal. Now, Alton and Diffin kind of left the band pretty shortly after, I want to say in either 1984 or 1985, the following year.
1985.
Yeah. 1985 definitely represented a bit of a shift. They brought in a hardcore drummer, Phil Hines, who actually was in a hardcore band in the Flint area called Dissonance. You know, that word we like to say a lot.
Right, yeah.
Take a shot.
Yeah, drink up.
Now, during this time, they went through some name changes. They pretty much abandoned the whole Tempter thing because they really weren't doing covers anymore. They wanted to write some originals. So they switched over to Ultraviolence for a very short time, and then moved on to Genocide. And this is pretty much the very beginnings of Repulsion. Now, during this time, they actually recorded a demo in 1984 or 85. It's kind of all over the place in terms of the history here, but I believe it was late 84 or early 85. Now, it was during this time in 1985, actually the summer of 85, that Scott Carlson and Matt Olivo actually approached one Chuck Schuldiner from Death and talked to him about sort of combining bands. He was still working with Cam Lee, and he was pretty much looking for the next incarnation of Death because Chuck was pretty much full steam ahead on this whole Death project. So they actually went down to Tampa, Florida for a little while, or it might have actually been Orlando at that point. Either way, they were in Florida. They weren't in Flint, and they were probably thankful.
I've been to Flint.
Totally different atmosphere. We've been to Flint.
Yep.
But during this time, they jammed together. They kind of thought they had something going, but the ideas didn't gel very well, and it pretty much sort of just fell apart right there.
Chuck told him yes, though.
Yeah.
He told him yes, and that's why they went down there. But yeah,
I mean, he liked them.
It fell apart, and then the drummer quit. So.
Yep. And pretty much they were like, well, yeah. So they pretty much hightailed it back to Flint and see if they can pick up where they left off with Genocide, and they recruited one Dave Grave Hollingsworth. And there's a reason why they called him Dave Grave, because I guess Scott Carlson heard about him courtesy of a police report because he actually was grave robbing. So, yeah, he earned it.
I mean, it's Flint.
It's Flint. And it's pretty metal. So, yeah. Now, during this time, Scott Carlson switched over to playing bass and doing vocals at the same time. And during this time, they recorded their Violent Death demo, which was the last demo that was technically just a Genocide demo. Pretty much they worked on this one, and then they decided we got to record a full length. So they went to the studio and recorded the Stench of Burning Death demo. Now, this was intended to be a full length, but it never actually sort of formulated as a full length. It just pretty much ended up as a demo. And pretty much during this time in 1986, they changed their name to Repulsion, namely because they were never fans of the name Genocide, and there were too many other bands named Genocide, and that's kind of a fight for that. And the only other Repulsion that I really knew of was the Repulsion that turned out to be Typo Negative, and well, Typo had a much better name with the second run there. Repulsion's a good name, but it fits for a spastic grindcore band.
From Flint, Michigan.
Yes.
I just have to keep throwing that in. We talked about it, and we think they may have written this album in the wintertime in Flint, Michigan.
Just looked outside.
Looked outside and was like... Ugh.
Finished my cigarette, flicked it in the ground.
It's kind of
Let's
like
go.
us looking outside right now. It's also shitty as fuck. fuck outside.
It's the Midwest. It snows. It's awful. Only all the time, though. So in 1986, they actually recorded their album Horrified. Now, it wasn't called that. I believe they had a slightly different name on there, but we'll get to that because it sort of picks up after that, because they broke up before this album was ever released. Recorded in 86, but wasn't released until 89.
And another interesting side note is when they recorded this album, it was actually recorded in Scott's bedroom, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
For the grand total of $300.
This was $300 well spent.
Yep, I agree.
So before we say what happened afterwards, let's actually get down to the album. And, well, you like bullet-trained grindcore and just fiercely punk and thrash-driven grindcore, you probably already own this album and probably recognize its pretty underground legendary status. Opens up with The Stench of Burning Death, much like the demo, and a good chunk of this is actually demo songs that they had on there from different demos, and then they actually had 8 new ones they put on there. And it's kind of hard to tell which ones are which because, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
This album flies by. The longest song on here is 2 minutes and 16 seconds.
It's even further difficult to tell which songs may have been added later and or re-recorded because the whole record sounds pretty repulsive.
Yeah.
Which makes total sense.
It's uniform disgustingness.
Yep.
So, I mean, it pretty much all has the same style. It is just nasty grindcore. I mean, I guess you can almost say it was proto-grindcore because, I mean, I don't think in 86 that term was really flying around yet.
Well, and you can immediately tell why they would have called up Chuck and why they would have wanted to merge with Death because you hear that almost immediately.
Yeah. I mean, you have death metal tremolo riffs in there, but there's a distinctly nasty, thrashy backbone, but it's not like the catchy thrash. It's more along the lines of, like, Slayer and, like, the earlier thrash and Possessed. Like, it is dirty sounding. Early Sepultura.
Yeah, I was going to say, it reminds me a lot of early Sepultura. Like we said, this may be the predecessor for everything.
Yeah, this is one of those linchpin albums for extreme metal in general, but in terms of grindcore and death metal specifically, there's a lot on here. I mean, we have songs like Acid Bath, 6 Feet Under. Too bad no one else is using those names or has ever used those names.
Acid Bath, Crematorium, and even Repulsion, which...
Yeah, I don't even know who's using that.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Mystery. This album is frantic. It punches you in the face relentlessly. I'm pretty sure Dave Graves' drums probably pressed charges against Dave Graves for beating the ever-living shit out of him.
He beat the shit out of him and then dumped him outside the expressway. There you go. Just get out of here.
The corpse of a kit. That was what was left after this, because his performance on here is just absolutely unhinged, and it's not like that very polished, like we have nice smooth mechanics in terms of like blast beats and turnovers. It's like, no, I'm gonna just beat the shit out of this.
I'm gonna take all this speed and then play as fast as I can.
There's a lot of fuck you dad energy on that. But when it comes down to even like kind of slowing it up, which there are slower songs, but they're still not slow. It's pretty much like a big thrashy stomp or like a D-beat stomp. There's still a lot of Venom worship on here. There's some Motorhead sort of punch to it, but again, grittier, dirtier, more evil Motorhead. Sorry, Lemmy, you lost that one.
Like Festering Boils. That does slow down. It almost sounds like a rock D-beat. Like it's the couple's skate ballad.
Yep, that's the closest thing you get to a ballad, and it's not a ballad at all. Now, even when you get down to like the longer songs, you do get some cool nuances. Longer songs, as in the only ones that are over 2 minutes. Driven to Insanity and Black Breath, both over 2 minutes, but you get like subtle nuances in there. Black Breath is actually kind of more of a thrash song to start off.
Yep.
And I gotta say, despite the furious, dissonant, ugly nature of this entire album,
dissonant. Take another
shot. That has some really solid hooks in it. There are some legit, like, solid thrash hooks in it. And it doesn't just freak out immediately. There is, of course, a little freak out because this is grindcore. You're supposed to freak out. But this one actually kind of labors like a little bit of like a sort of a thrashy stomp, like you'd hear on like maybe Ride the Lightning, except dirtier.
I really like the track Repulsion. First of all, the mix has a squeal in it, and I know it's him hitting the ride cymbal, but it's got a squeal in it that's almost deafening. It sounds repulsive, but it has a breakdown.
It's the slowest point on the album, and it's about 4 seconds.
Yep. It's by the time you catch it, it's gone.
It was at this point when I was listening to this song too. It was like, man, even Napalm Death and Carcass and like Bolt Thrower on their first album, they kind of had like these little pockets of groove.
Yep.
This does not. This is just like this little bit.
Just a smidge, just a C word here.
And if you want us to slow down, it's a D beat stomp. So guess what? You're still moving fast. And that is pretty much the entire feel on this. The first song I ever heard by Repulsion was courtesy of the compilation Choosing Death, which was a soundtrack to a book, which sounds weird, but that happened. And they actually pretty much just went through like the chronicles of extreme metal, and they had the song Maggots in Your Coffin. And I was kind of shocked because I'd never actually heard this before, yet this was such a underground, like kind of storied band. And I was shocked to find out that this was actually recorded in '86, when this kind of music was just not
unheard of.
Unheard of.
Yeah.
Like this was like leaps and bounds more extreme than anything that came out in 1986, as far as I know. I mean, I might be missing some stuff, but this is a tall order in terms of jumping extremes. The other thing that really drives this album is the frantic punk-like nature of it. This is pretty much like if, you know, someone approached a metal band and was like, hey, you want to write a punk album? And they were like, no, we're just going to do this. It's fast.
We're just going to do this instead.
Don't worry, we're going to take your song lengths, though, and we're going to make it work. By the way, our drummer moves faster than you.
Yep.
And that's the sort of the punk ethos that's on here. There's no pretense. There's no, you know, real like discernible, clean, pretty melodies.
Yeah, there's not. This is fuck you. We're gonna play fast.
That's it.
And heavy.
Atmosphere? The fuck is that? We grind. That's what we do. And in a sense, that is their atmosphere. Just unrelenting grind.
Yep.
And the production is really interesting on this. Now, granted, I'm listening to the 2003 reissue that came out on Relapse, but I don't think they cleaned it up much. Just mostly just like, we're just going to turn it up a little bit.
Yeah, they may have tweaked things here and there, but like immediately when the record comes in, it sounds like the 80s.
But you can hear like subtle variations in terms of the production. Like some songs, you know, the drums are a little bit louder. Sometimes Scott's vocals are out front, which I really like. Scott Carlson's vocal cadences.
Yeah,
they are driven, they're punchy, and he's got a really good snarling
and the lyrics
voice.
are ridiculous. If you ever get a chance to read the lyrics, read the lyrics.
They love horror movies.
Yep.
They love them. I love horror movies. I love Repulsion. That's pretty much it. That's the relationship that I have with Repulsion and horror movies. Love. And then there's Scott's bass. Scott's bass ranges in levels of disgusting to disturbing to just, I think it's broken, quit playing it, you broke everything. It's, why are you doing that?
Sounded like sandpaper scraping across an old chair.
Festering Boils, again, that opens up with just his snarling bass, and it is a disturbing noise that, yeah, I think it was broken, but he didn't give a shit. It's like, no, this is grind.
I think he blew the cabinet, actually.
Yeah.
Is what I think happened. And then they were like, fuck it, let's just do it.
This bass, this cabinet is as broken as this town Flint, and we're just going to echo it right here. Overall, this is essential listening. If you're a grindcore fan, you probably already have listened to this, but if you haven't, this is essentially a giant stepping stone for extreme music.
Right, if you haven't, this is where a lot of everything, the death metal, grind, all of it, this is where a lot of it comes from.
Yeah, this is a moment in history that people that don't like extreme music want to forget. But we won't let them because it's an awesome album. And overall, I'm going to give it 4 stars. This is one of my favorite grind albums because it is sort of unique. It's almost sort of like the prototype for it.
Yep.
You hear all the stuff that came before it. You know, the thrash, you know, that D beat, the little like bits of Venom worship and stuff like that. But I don't know, it's the punk nature of it, the fact that it is 18 tracks and 29 minutes, and it just whoops your ass. There's no bullshit on it. It doesn't stop. You just keep going through it, and by the end of it, you should love it if you just love extreme music.
Yep. And for that pretty much same reason, I'm going to give it a 4 too. This record grows on me every time I hear it.
Like a rash.
I think this is like my second or third time ever hearing this record, but like, again, you get to see where everything came from. It's like listening to the very beginning of creation of anything. It's all got to start somewhere, and this is where a lot of the bands that I know and love and have followed for many years came from. And I like the fact that it doesn't really quit. It's balls to the wall the entire time. There's no separation between tracks. If we hadn't been sitting there pausing it every time a minute and a half song ended, I wouldn't have even gotten notes. Like, it's great.
I feel like we were giving the band a chance to catch their breath on the CD.
And plus, being named Repulsion and being from Flint, Michigan, I get it.
Yeah.
I get how this record sounds so nasty, because, I've been there.
I mean, even Flint in the 80s, man, this was like kind of Rust Belt time.
I mean, you can still drink the water then, not now.
No, you can't.
But,
the water is possibly just as gritty as this album, so don't drink it. But listen to this album.
Definitely listen to this album. Yeah, man, I had fucking fun. It was great.
All right, now we're going to get back to what happened here. Now, again, recorded in 1986, and they didn't release it for 3 more years. Now, when it was released, it was courtesy of another band that is a giant pioneer in grindcore, and that was Carcass. Carcass essentially released it through their Necrosis Records, which is a subsidiary of Earache Records, which Carcass was signed to. And it really caught fire. They were giant fans of it. Of course, they wanted to promote it because they're, fellow grind brothers from across the pond. And at this point, Repulsion had already broken up. They broke up in 1988. So this was a posthumous release. But when they got wind that it was starting to take off, they reformed in 1990 and started playing a lot of shows. So this album sort of gained like an underground status, and, well, the pressure was on to sort of record more. So I think later in 1990, they returned to the studio to actually do some more demoing. Now, when they returned, they kind of had a different mindset. They wanted to write some slower, more groove-oriented songs. Definitely heavy, but a departure from what they already did.
Yep.
And I think during this time they kind of were venturing out into different territories in terms of like what they were interested in, and they even demoed some more songs on top of that, but none of these really saw the light of day. And at this point, Scott had kind of lost interest in Repulsion altogether, and that pretty much kind of signaled the end of the band. Now the rest of the guys kind of split off, did their own things. Scott Carlson actually joined Cathedral for a little while, which is a hell of a change.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you went from insane grindcore to playing in slow, nasty doom metal, but with a, historic grindcore vocalist at one point with Lee Dorian.
I mean, you can probably only pick that fast for so. You can probably only do that for so long.
They probably made him fix his amp.
Carpal tunnel, and want to take a break.
But there was a long period of dormancy after that, and it wasn't until this album was actually reissued with all the demos and everything through Relapse that they actually reformed again, but mostly in just a touring capacity. Now, it was Scott Carlson and Matt Olivio, but outside of that, it was pretty much sort of a revolving door of different musicians that would jump on tour with them. I believe Marissa Martinez was in there. They've had multiple different drummers, and it's pretty much just around in a touring capacity, or hopefully not, honestly. I mean, I would rather see them go back to the studio, because I still would love to hear their approach now, because Scott Carlson has done some other cool stuff too. I think he popped up on Death Breath's first album, which was boatloads of fun. So he still has that stuff in him to actually write this stuff. I would just like to see it under the Repulsion banner.
At the same time, I would like to see them do this whole record from start to finish. Maybe play MDF or something. That seems to be a place where bands that you haven't heard in forever.
I'm pretty sure Repulsion's probably played MDF at one point.
I would guess too.
I would have to guess.
Actually, I'm going to go back and look, not now, but later.
Yeah. But I mean, if that's all they're around for now, just to tour and see it live, I would still 100% support that, because I would love to see this absolute insane album played live. This is an awesome grindcore legend, and it sucks it's only a one-off, but you know what? It's a brilliant one-off, and it is probably one of the most influential one-offs I think we've talked about in terms of these retro reviews, because this literally did help shape everything. And, that saying about, don't be first in terms of anything, because it's generally not the innovators that get all the credit, it's the people that popularize it afterwards. That might be Repulsion's case. But either way, we got this killer album, and you should definitely check it out, because it's absolutely amazing. And if you're even just thinking about getting into grind, this is a nice, fun place to start. It's going to beat the shit out of you, but you'll grow to love it.
Yep, you'll grow to love it. Plus, you'll prep yourself for what came after this. There's so much badass grind.
Grind is awesome, and a lot of it is thanks to Repulsion. And of course, Napalm Death and Carcass and all those other kick-ass bands. But yeah, Repulsion, definitely in there.
So speaking of thank you, you've seen all our top albums of the year, and you saw that, we all kind of sat down and thanked you guys for coming here. By the time you guys see this video, it's actually going to be somewhat monumental for Thralls. Tomorrow is our 2-year anniversary of the first time we ever shot a video for Thralls. Now, obviously, you see we've upgraded a little bit.
It was just in a different room.
It was just right. It was just right over there.
With shittier lighting. Worse audio.
Yeah, right. And definitely, you know, 2 dudes who had no idea what it was like to sit in front of a camera and talk to people and do all the shit we do now.
Still winging it.
Even more monumental, though, I suppose tomorrow is, you know, without this guy, this would have been at least a little bit tougher to start. Again, by the time you see this video tomorrow, it will be his birthday. He will be older. I won't fully disclose how old because math is hard and there's a lot of numbers.
It's a large number. I mean, compared to smaller numbers.
Compared to smaller numbers.
Compared to bigger numbers, though.
Yeah, compared to bigger numbers,
small.
It's a smaller number. You know, and of course, I'm younger and will always be younger because he's older.
But yeah, pretty much, I didn't really think about it until we actually were talking about it. I was like, oh my God, we've been doing this for 2 years, and we didn't think it'd actually even really take off, and here we are at almost 4,000 subs, and thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to all of you.
You know, when because we were talking about this earlier too, you know, when we sat down and got the idea for Thralls, and you know, we actually had the idea several months before we actually sat down and did anything.
A lot of procrastinating.
A lot of drinking just kind of led to, you know, you want to do that? Sure, sounds great.
You want to get blackout drunk and forget we had this conversation?
Yes.
Already well ahead of you. But here we are, and we've been doing this for a while, and we still really enjoy it, and we enjoy all of the communication with everyone. It's been a lot of fun.
I've had so much fun speaking with many people all over the world, you know, and I mean, who the hell are we? We're only at 4,000 subs, but holy shit, has this been fun.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for it.
Super thankful, and thankful for all of you guys.
Yep.
So, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We will catch you later.